And halfway done, we're gonna do the music. Can we put on which one you want to hear? Any song? Any kind of that's what I mean. I mean, I don't know. Whatever. We're open. We're open. What's a good one? You got good ones. You show me what's some good ones. What's a good one?
Not Oslo native?
No. Anyone that you recently come across that had
something according to the bottom track.
Something good in it.
I don't know, maybe recent.
Okay. Okay, we'll go with Aslan Native, brother. Kids in Cages. We'll do Kids in Cages.
Yeah.
They just recorded on one of the
The one on SoundCloud by Aslan Native?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Got it. Okay. Ready? Oh, yeah. Can you play the bumper, bro?
Absolutely. I got it to kill. The cord wasn't even on the way.
And this is KEXU 96.1 FM, Pole People's Revolutionary Radio. I'm JV, and you're listening to Free Aslan. And today we're going to have a show on dialectics. Very important. Anybody who considers themselves a revolutionary-minded person should know about dialectics, and especially for the Chicano Nation. This is very important, today's show, because I'm going to dispel some of the myths and false propaganda, state propaganda, imperialist propaganda out there that claims, dialectics and other Marxist concepts or concepts from Lenin or Mao or anybody else, Stalin, Engels, anybody. Many times the state, creates this propaganda in order to attempt to claim that these revolutionary concepts are, they're from Europe, and stay away from them. They're, but it's like me saying a gun is from China or a gun is from here or there. Therefore, stay away from it. These are concepts that can be used by any nation, just as a gun can be used by anybody in any nation, no matter who made it, and used to liberate the people, used to defend the people, used to build the nation. And so this is This is how we see revolutionary concepts. And these are weapons, just like the rifle. These are used in order to further our struggle, to understand how to struggle, and to understand our social reality, how to combat it. And so we use these. And when it comes to dialectics, you know, um, we're going to get into that, but I'm going to also explain. And to some people, it may be breaking news. Some people have never heard this. I've never heard of anybody talk about this the way I have, and I've been talking about this for a few years now. This is the first show on it, but it's where I will show that it was our ancestors that practiced dialectics. You know, for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, and we um, didn't call it dialectics, but the same concept our ancestors, indigenous ancestors on this continent, have been understanding, believing, and utilizing this concept, this revolutionary concept, in order to further them, to further their struggles, and so this is what I'm going to dispel the myths of the false propaganda from the state, and the state's running dogs, the Chicano Uncle Toms, and all of the above. So we're going to get into that. Also, I have a special guest here. I have CJ from MIM Prisons, and CJ is going to be on the show as well. Welcome to Free Islam, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and so we're gonna have a good show today. First, I want to announce some news from the Chicano News Service, and we have a few things for you. First thing on the list is this mass shooting that took place in Tejaslan. You know, um, you know, bunch of kids, bunch of babies were killed, and it's horrible that so many young children lost their lives. Mostly raza, mostly Chicano youth lost their lives in that mass shooting. It's horrible what happened. And anybody with children or anybody without children knows that children, I mean, especially at that age, most vulnerable people in society, amongst the most vulnerable, and they were shot and killed. But an interesting thing that Aslan, the free Aslan, wants to report on is that the cowardice of the pigs. Very, very important. We understand what occurred. So here we have dozens of pigs armed to the teeth, and we see them in our streets. We see them hyper policing our communities. We see them gunning down our friends and neighbors and family. I have a primo that was shot and killed by the San Jose Police Department. The pigs murdered him in the early 1970s. So my family has been dealing, now it's real popular to, families that are, something happens and they, have these groups, but my family has been dealing with this before, any group was even thought of like that. We're talking 40 something years my family has been dealing with pig terror, and our one of our family members getting gunned down by the pigs for nothing. Nothing happened to the pig, and so this is a real thing. But it's very important. Mao talked about the imperialists, specifically the U.S. Being a paper tiger. Being a paper tiger, and they look all powerful, but in reality they're paper tigers. And we could read some of these words from decades before, but when you see them playing out, it's really extraordinary to see them, to see the pigs the first line of defense of America, the first line of defense cower, tuck their tail between their legs, lay their guns down, and be afraid to enter the lion's den and play with the lion. One person had a gun, and you have dozens of pigs, and they stood there in puddles of urine that they, pissed themselves, and were afraid to go into the school to save these babies. Very important lesson. Mao's words rang true when I seen it on the news. These pigs are paper tigers. Yes, they will be very, terrifying to some when there's, 8 of them with guns pointed at one unarmed person who's maybe running down the street. Yeah. But when you have one person, one single person armed, their true colors come out. They tuck themselves. It was an embarrassment for America. It was a black eye to America. It was definitely a slap in the mouth to the United Snakes to see their first line of defense, the people who are supposed to protect capitalism, defend capitalism. Don't let them burn down the cities. Don't let them, rush the White House. Don't let them do none of this stuff. The front line of defense are here to protect capitalism and the state. But they did not. They couldn't even protect children as young as, grade school children. It was disgusting to see their behavior where they just piss themselves and let these children just die, and we don't promote the pigs in any way. We promote the idea of never killing the pigs. It's important to that's probably one of the important things that we have to do in this society is build some kind of support network where we have somebody to call in the event of danger, who's not the pigs, somebody from the community. That's very important. And some of you know what I'm talking about. You call somebody, pigs ain't gonna help me, but so and so will. Hey, there's a situation. Okay. There's people out there who do help people, and you have to find them and cultivate that network. And that's the importance of having, a network in the community. But, so going back to the cowardice actions of the pigs, it just revealed that, when the Civil War comes, and it is coming, we don't know when it's coming, but definitely it's coming. And many people are building, organizing, and educating people for that day when it comes. And some people may see it as an unrealistic feat. We could never, there's never going to be a civil war. Like, they're just all powerful. We seen on the news in Texas, it is not impossible. You got one person, and dozens of pigs were, cowering with their, tails between them legs. And no matter that they had guns and shotguns and AR-15s and all of this weaponry, and they still pissed themselves. And so this is a good lesson. One person with one gun. Had there been 100 people with 100 guns, what would happen? They can't even handle one person with one gun. So it's very important that we understand they are not all powerful. Now we're not promoting armed struggle here on Free Aslan. We would never do something like that. Listeners know that. However, in the future, there is going to be a struggle. It is going to be an armed struggle. And there is going to be a revolution that overturns the oppression that has been laid upon the Chicano nation and other oppressed nations from the white oppressor nation. that is coming, and it's going to be real, and it's going down, and we're going to see a lot of what we saw here in the mass shooting in Texas. We're going to see so many of the states, defenses lay down their arms and tuck and run. We're going to see that. So this was just a small snapshot into, what is going on. And there's the military, and there's a lot of apparatus that we can, and those are another shows. What I'm doing here is highlighting and showing that that was an example, a real concrete example, that the state is not as all powerful as they portray in their propaganda. To the contrary, the state are paper tigers, and they are very organized, but most of them are not willing to die for America. Whereas when you look at the oppressed nations and how people have been terrorized, you could see small uprisings that have occurred throughout time here in these false U.S. borders. You could see the LA rebellion, early 90s. The oppressed are willing to die to lift off the burden of oppression, and the oppressed die every day doing so. And there's many heroes within the oppressed nations, people who have rose up in rebellions against the pigs, against the state, against military, against a lot of people. Now, we're not promoting people to do that, but we are highlighting that that is done, that they are coward. They do practice cowardism, and that was an example. One person, they couldn't go in there and save these children. And that's an example of what's going to happen, a small prelude of what's going to happen when the Civil War pops off. So, this is very important that we pay attention to the enemy's weaknesses. It's very important that we watch the enemy, know their strengths, know their weaknesses. And this is really going to play into today's show of dialectics. And the opposites, strengths, weaknesses. It's very important we learn that, so we know how to, even within ourselves, so we can understand how to harness our strengths, and how to maneuver through weaknesses, challenges. So that's very important. But I want to bring on Comrade CJ from MIM Prisons. Welcome back, comrade. And if you have a few words for us, update us on the concentration camps, the prisons, and what kind of stuff is going on.
Yeah, so the news item I have for us tonight is the Juneteenth Freedom Initiative campaign being led out of Texas prisons. Before I get into some of the news updates and how people can get involved, I want to connect it, just frame what this campaign is, kind of relating to some of the things that you were just talking about. As we know, Juneteenth is to celebrate the day the slaves were supposedly freed and given citizenship. Now, as you were just talking about, the contradictions within the United States, the contradiction between the oppressor and the oppressed. And we talk about dialectics, there's two sides to a thing. And according to the dialectics, when that's a contradiction, antagonistic contradiction, one of those things has to overcome the other. And when we talk about Juneteenth, a lot of new African nationalist revolutionaries will point out that Juneteenth wasn't something that Black people chose. It was something that was handed to them. They were said, here, now you're U.S. citizens. And one of the points that they often make is, well, we didn't choose to be U.S. citizens. And the other point to make is that the contradiction was not resolved, right? The oppressed did not overcome the oppressor and come to a solution that solved the problem of this oppression. The oppression continued in another form. And as many point out, U.S. prisons are there's a continuation, right, between institutions like slavery and the prison system. Even though they're different systems, there's connections there because that contradiction was never resolved. And of course, that contradiction exists with all the oppressed nations, internal semi-colonies in the United States. It exists with us long, the First Nations as well, in slightly different forms. And as one of the recent articles that came out of this movement, Texas Team One is one of the organizations initiated, and they're the ones that initiated one of the organizations leading the Juneteenth Freedom Initiative. They did put out a statement in the recent issue of Under Lock and Key to really stress that the Juneteenth, even though Juneteenth is a holiday that's associated with New Africans and Black people, that this Juneteenth Freedom Initiative is about prisoners, and this is not a single nation campaign. And Texas Team One is a multinational organization led by Chicanos, New Africans, and all sorts of people in Texas prisons, but mostly New Africans and Chicanos, who are the majority of the people imprisoned in Texas and across the United States.
Yeah. In this campaign, how long has it been going on?
So it's been in the works for some months, since late last year at least. But this Juneteenth is really the launch. So it's just been preparation up until now, and we're approaching Juneteenth very quickly. And as we've been approaching it, we've seen an increase in repression and in censorship. Some mail, not being delivered for months or ever, between people on the outside and people on the inside.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds
it's
familiar,
horrible.
right? Yeah, and it is very effective. It's hard when you don't hear from people for months to do that organizing. But we are working hard to provide regular updates on prisoncensorship.info. So you should check out the site if you want to get info on the campaign and some of the things I'm going to talk about and ways to get involved. But so some of the updates are let me step back. So the campaign is basically saying, like I said, Juneteenth didn't free us, and the evidence of that is mass incarceration, long-term solitary confinement, torture chambers, and all of the other oppression and things that people face in prison, including the censorship. They're really calling on people, similar to some of their strikes that happen, even in California. They're really calling on people to bring their complaints to the forefront, whatever they may be. But some of the key target campaign issues are long-term solitary confinement, mass incarceration, mail censorship, and also unpaid labor. There's a lot of unpaid labor in Texas. So those are some of the campaign demands, and the general plan is that Juneteenth to have a boycott of the holiday. So prisoners are not going to celebrate, and they're going to instead let their voices be heard in various ways, including going on strike, including there will be hunger strikes happening in some of the restrictive housing units, the RHUs. There will be other forms of organization. People will be having teaching and study groups on the inside. They've asked for people on the outside to hold demonstrations, particularly in Texas. And we are in touch with people who are trying to make that happen. So if you're interested in trying to hold a demonstration, you can contact MIM Prisons. Check out prisoncensorship.info. I should also mention that this is happening. This was not necessarily meant to be just in Texas, and there is organizing going on in North Carolina, and there's going to be a phone zap campaign in support of a hunger strike in some of the solitary confinement units in North Carolina on this June 19th as well. And this is the June 19th is the initiator of the campaign. The follow-up to that will include a petition to the Department of Justice calling for attention to be put to these various issues that they're bringing up, and there will be further actions that may take it to the UN, and trying to connect it. They're definitely consciously connecting this campaign to the recent UN tribunal on genocide in the United States, which was a New African-led initiative, but again, it also addressed genocide against all of the internal semi-colonies across the United States in that tribunal. So they're really connecting it to that campaign of genocide and opposing genocide, of course, and national liberation struggles. So some of the things that you can do to get involved, you can find on our website. We were doing a postcard campaign to protest the censorship going on in Allred, which is one of the main
Control units.
control units, RHU. So a lot of the organizers with Texas Team One are in Allred, and that's where a lot of the mail is being withheld for months at a time. So we're asking people. We have postcards you can print out. You can get people to sign them. Mail them in to Allred, and let them know that people on the outside are paying attention, because they do care what people think, despite what it might seem like. And we have flyers you can print off our website. We will be doing phone zaps in North Carolina. We do have a phone number up for Allred. You can call Allred to complain about the censorship. And then on June 19th, we'll be doing a phone zap, hopefully from North Carolina, to support their hunger strike, and trying to perhaps organize these demonstrations in Texas. And of course, you can get involved in any of our regular support work, which is getting the newsletter out and regular letters out we're trying to send regular letters to the prisoners if they get in, to give them updates of what's going on, like we did when the California hunger strikes were going on. We were sending out letters every couple of weeks to give them updates on what other people were doing, so they could keep in touch as best we can. So help support all that work that we're doing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I remember during the hunger strikes, some people think that work doesn't do nothing, but it's actually all people have in there. So it's really the only link to so many that have to the outside of what's going on, who's helping, how are people helping. And it does help to boost the morale of those who are struggling, to know that there are people struggling with them. So that is very, very powerful to ensure that prisoners know, they got support. People got their back out here. And, so it's important. So we'll be following the situation as well here on Free Aslan, to keep everybody updated as well. For those who have family in Tejaslan, and also some of the listeners that live in Tejaslan should probably connect. You could connect Free Aslan on all social media, anything out there, pushing Free Aslan, connect. And
if you're in Texas, we'd love to get help with the postcards, or even setting up demonstrations.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of Texas prisons are filled with Chicano people. Chicano and Black people are probably the majority of Texas prison systems. So for all you Tejas Chicano organizations, and Black organizations, we can't forget our people that are behind the walls. Just because they're in the concentration camp, that's imprisoned Aslan, that's imprisoned New Africa. So it's important that we don't just, focus on those out here who can donate money, and, they can, make websites for our organizations and do, workshops with it. No. How about if you're really about that, how about your fallen people that are in concentration camps? You don't give a damn about them? Like, that's a cold reflection of your organization if you turn your back on your imprisoned comrades. What if your comrades working in your organization today are imprisoned because some of their actions? So we have to make them connections, even if we don't have them. And it's not hard. So, we gotta, it's not just about people out here. We got people in the camps that need assistance and struggling as well. So that's something we have to really push on our people, because people are, if I can't see them and I can't touch them, I'm not doing nothing for them. Like, this is ridiculous thinking, where the enemy has us against. They do that in the Middle East a lot with these groups. These whatever the groups are. Whether they want to call them Al Qaeda, what have you, whatever the group's names are. What the U.S. imperialists do is they go into those communities, they spread propaganda on whatever group they're talking about, framing them as bad enemy, blah blah blah, and then the community turns into basic informants for the occupiers, for the U.S. military, and they'll go tell, let us know if you find any of them. We'll give you some money, and so they run to them. I think I know where the one's at. And they do this in prison too. They create informants or tell us where the bad guys are. They're out here if they're making you do something. And then here comes people. This person right here is telling me to do this. And then they capture them and throw them in the prisons, Guantanamos and the control units, So they employ the same methods in prisons, outside and around the world. And we got to remember who they call enemy. Who does America call the enemy? For those who remember, they called Pancho Villa the enemy and Zapata. They called them bandits. They called them, they were, terrorizing people and torture. They always, they've done that in, everywhere around the world. The people's leaders who have stepped up to help liberate them, the U.S. propaganda machine has always tried to paint them as the enemy to turn to people. There's not one person who stood up to serve the people and has not been spoken bad against by America. And that goes for us in the Chicano Nation. That goes for Joaquin Murrieta. That goes for Tiburcio Vasquez, our heroes of Aztlan. The state called them bandits. And, bandit is just an old-fashioned term that if it was in today's world, they would call them either quote-unquote gang members or quote-unquote terrorists. But back then, 100 or so years ago, they called everybody bandits that they felt were resisting them. So, and they're the real terrorists, and the real bad guys are the occupiers who continue to occupy our land, our economy, resources, and every aspect of our lives. So we got to remember, what information we're hearing it from, who we're hearing it from, and anything from America has always been to uphold their stranglehold on the oppressed nations, people here in these false U.S. borders. But we're going to take a short break. We're going to listen to a song by Aztlan Native. It's Kids in Cages, because we still have kids in cages, by the way, in case some forgot about that. But there's still little children, brown children, raza, who are being tortured in the ICE concentration camps. So we need to continue to keep that alive, that truth alive, and start to do more actions surrounding the kids in cages again, because there was a lot of stuff going on a couple years ago. Kind of things kind of slowed down. We need to pick it back up and not forget these kids in cages. So with that being said, we will be back in a few minutes.
$70,000 children in the cages, in the cages, in the cages, in the cages. 70,000 children in the cages, in the cages,
They were
in the cages. In the cage, 70,000 children in the cages. You expect us not to see this is outrageous. We got to come together, every color, all ages. My life is like a book, and this is one of many pages. You could be the greatest, I'ma be the most courageous at the protest, snatching Trump flags from we race. You could be the bravest, I'ma be the most courageous at the protest, snatching Trump flags from we race. I know you hate this misery, these company, cop watch our slime, just watch how these pigs run from me. Mr. Swine Covian, what do you want from me? Besides doing a bit, taking my guns guns from me. Release the
they
kids,
had
make
big
sure that
actors
every
in
one
there
of
and
them free.
stuff like
Not
this.
exploited across the nation
Made
and never
movies
seen.
about it.
We don't want
One
them
or two
anywhere near
people
foster
just,
home. Adopted by
giving it
pedophiles
to
from
them. So
Bohemian Grove. Epstein
it's
related,
very
and everybody
interesting
knows
when we
what
hear,
goes on in the White House behind the
when we
closed doors.
see
Abolish ICE, abolish the whole
this
system.
kind of
We don't
stuff
want it revised,
playing out.
I
abolish
think
the
the movies have
resistant.
worked against them
Abolish
in
ICE,
this. Like
abolish the
the
whole
movies
system.
always
We
show
don't want it
them
revised, abolish
being
because
the
we
heroes. They're
resist
gonna
it.
come in and jump to action, and so we have these expectations of them that they can't live up
Like
to.
superheroes,
Yeah.
right? They'll solve anything. Yeah. But
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because a lot of shows have been really, a lot of even like extremist, like far left, far right shows have really been grabbing onto the Second Amendment issue. I think that it is the more interesting issue is what is this? This really is a sign of the internal contradictions of America and like the weaknesses. I mean, obviously, sometimes this violence is being targeted against oppressed people, but yeah, it seems like a symptom of the sickness of this country.
Sickness, and it's with white supremacy has definitely it's a sickness. Capitalism is just a sickness. It's horrible that people, and not only here but around the world, people are suffering like what the pigs do here. The military, U.S. military, does to other countries, right? It's like the police of the pigs of the world pigs, and just incredible. But we're gonna get back in here.
Ready?
So we're back here at KEXU 96.1 FM, back at Free Aslan. Comrade CJ, welcome back to Free Aslan.
Good to be here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's sometimes I sit back and just think, it's really amazing that I was in the concentration camp, especially in these state controlled control units, and interacting with men prisons in the study groups. Amazing. Sometimes I sit back and then here I am doing Radio Free Aslan, and having a comrade from men prisons come, and it's just like a full circle. It's just like it's just so beautiful to see this and to be able to participate out here and to help to further different struggles going on as well. And the study groups in there really really help to sharpen my understanding of what I was going through, not just in the concentration camp, but out here. And not just out here now, but our entire social reality as oppressed internal colonies here in the snakes. It's really, and so when I sit back now, I know what these study groups do. I see it, and it was by learning concepts like dialectics that I feel helped me to get through the ordeal of solitary confinement for a decade. Incredible, torturing for a decade. And it was because I think I've always been a very stubborn person. So it's kind of like I know what they're doing. Just because they're trying to do that, they ain't gonna do that. They ain't gonna destroy me because they're trying to. Just for that, I'm gonna resist. And that was just something that was embedded in me. That and then I had the armed weapons of revolutionary theory. So in today's show, I wanted to talk about dialectics, and Marx really, shaped dialectics. And of course, Hegel and Plato and all these philosophers have, they've touched on certain elements of it, but it was Marx who really brought it to the people, to the revolutionary movement. And initially, and taught us, how we could understand something like dialectics, which, anybody who's considers themselves a revolutionary, communist, or what have you, you have to understand Marxist concepts like dialectics. Dialectics is the study of opposites. It's understanding that in the world, there are opposites at work, in all phenomenon. We can look at anything in life and understand there's two sides. There's opposing sides. There's opposing views. There's opposing perpetual struggle going on, one side and the other. And I think even within people themselves, Marx said something like, all matter is in motion. But that motion doesn't necessarily have to be in a forward direction. That motion can be backwards. So people don't necessarily, it's not necessarily saying that people are going to progress, to grow, to develop in a positive way. It is also possible for people to regress, to go backwards, to deteriorate and decay. And that goes back to nations as well. Nations are a perfect example, in my opinion, of dialectics at work. Nations grow and nations die. You know, and some grow, some die. And that's part of that's part of the way things are. And that's dialectics, as Marx said. Matter is always in motion in some way, either forward or backwards. And when it comes to nations, either they're going to grow and prosper, develop, or they're going to decay and die. They're going to die out. And a lot of nations have died out, and people just, the nation is no more. We could go through history and name a bunch of nations that no longer exist, because they've died, they withered away. And we see America right now withering in decay. We see we see many signs of this, but dialectics, speaking from a Chicano perspective, I've heard the argument many times that, Marxist concepts are European, so don't listen to them. But again, this is a concept. This is not a wardrobe. It's not a costume as well. So, we're not using Marxism in order to try to look like somebody. We're using Marxist concepts like dialectics to understand the society we exist under, the contradictions, obstacles we're up against, so that we can figure out things like, what's the principal contradiction and what are secondary contradictions. That's an example of dialectics, is understanding that there's opposing forces. What are the opposing forces here in these false US borders? If we apply dialectics, what are the contradictions here? The main contradiction, principal contradiction, would be between the oppressed nations and the oppressor nation. America is the oppressor nation. You can't, have an oppressor and not have an oppressed. So, the oppressed nations, or the Chicano nation, First Nations, Black nations, and, and there's many other oppressed peoples here. But my point is that dialectics allows us to see these contradictions, and then we go about understanding them to understand what is the most important, the principal contradiction, because, that's what's holding us back. And it is America that's holding the internal colonies hostage. And if it wasn't for America, we could break free and take, seize power. So that's the principal contradiction. But there are many other contradictions as well, secondary contradictions. We're not going to understand this if we didn't know dialectics. So for people that are saying, that's European, it's just like, and, I sometimes there's people that say that, and they're telling me like, you're talking European stuff. Why are you doing that? But they're telling me this in the English language. Pendejos. It makes no sense. They don't even know what they're saying. They're telling me in the English language, a colonial language, stop being colonized with the. Wait a minute. First of all, you're speaking English, a colonized British, like stop it. They're using the American dollar to go buy their candy bars. Stop it. Like, you're using colonial money. That firearm you picked up the other day, that is manufactured by a colonial power. Like everything, like, stop it. But people can do that and use weapons for self-defense and cars to travel and money in order to, buy food to exist. They could do all these things, but let us throw some revolutionary theory at them, and all of a sudden, it's just, what that really is that their ability to grasp revolutionary theory is not there. They don't know how to respond. They know nothing about revolutionary concepts. And so it's like somebody who's very frightened, they're panicking, and that's the only thing that comes to mind. That's European. Like, next time somebody says that, I like to ask them, okay, that's European, but you understand it? Break that down for me anyway. They have nothing. So, it kind of highlights their ignorance is what it does. And of course, people don't want to admit that they are ignorant in a certain area, that they don't know something, they're uneducated. So what's the first thing they grab? That's a European, and so again, anybody who tells me, and I've had a lot of people tell me stuff like that, and I always hit them, first of all, you're speaking a European language, you're using European money, you live under a European government, which some are even partaking in the voting, which is, disgusting. Voting in a European ran bourgeois political system. That's okay, but don't talk about revolutionary theory that helps the oppressed nations break the chains of occupation. Don't talk that. It's so ridiculous. And so, but going back to dialectics, I just want to say that as a Chicano, indigenous people have been practicing, understanding, utilizing the revolutionary theory of dialectics for probably 1,000 or more years. And they didn't call them dialectics, but anybody who has any kind of basic understanding of cultura coming from what is now Mexico, especially the danza community, there's a concept, now a word called Ometeotl. Ometeotl. Now, Ometeotl, that's very important. And I love saying that, by the way. I love saying Ometeotl, Ometeotl. So anyway, Ometeotl is the understanding of duality for the Mexica people. There's duality in everything. There's a male, feminine aspect to things. There's good and bad, night and day, hot and cold. Everything has, one side and a contradictory side to it. This is what our ancestors believed in, Ometeotl. It's a word that even today danzantes use, Ometeotl. Now, Ometeotl, for those who didn't know, duality. What is duality? It's the opposites. So what is dialectics? A Marxist concept, revolutionary theory of the struggle of opposites, a contradiction in all phenomenon. This is what our ancestors believed in, Ometeotl. They believed in the contradictions in everything. And why did they understand that? Because they studied all phenomenon. That's why. Contrary to what the oppressor nation wants us to believe, our ancestors were very intelligent. They were so observant. They were so perceptive. They were able to study phenomenon in the space, study in the stars, study it amongst people. And yeah, they weren't perfect. Of course, they made some mistakes, like most people do. Of course they did. I'm not saying they were a perfect society. No, but they understood dialectics. They understood Ometeotl. They're not the only society. We could look at ancient China. They have something called Yin Yang. This is before Marx was born, going back again thousands of years. Yin Yang, the opposites. So many third world peoples had a deep grasp of dialectics. They didn't call it that, but they called it contradictions in everything. And why would they do that? They did it in order to understand society they lived in. And again, just like we do it now, if you understand the opposites, you could narrow it down to what's the main opposites, what's the principal contradiction, find it, identify it, and make efforts to knock it down. Overturn it, overthrow it, burn that, down. So this is what they did. They fought their obstacles. And today we have them as well. But that's just, I wanted to let people know. So the next time you hear some idiot talking about, oh, the dialectics, that's Marxism and that's European, you tell that person, you need to study your own history, because our ancestors practiced the understanding of opposites. And first you got to look up dialectics and get an understanding of that first before you speak on it. Secondly, look at your own history. Our people knew dialectics. Our people understood this revolutionary concept. They didn't call it that, but they called it Ometeotl. And it doesn't matter what we call it, as long as we understand there's opposing forces in society and use that to allow us to propel society forward, overcoming these obstacles. And so I just wanted to, make sure that Raza, particularly the Chicano nation, understands that dialectics is something that our ancestors understood, practiced for some time. Ometeotl, that's the struggle of contradictions. With that being said, I'd like to ask Comrade CJ if you have any input on dialectics to explain to the listeners.
Well, yeah, listening to you was very well put. And listening to you, I started thinking about Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. And in that book, he talks about nationalism often being led initially by the bourgeoisie. They develop it as a concept to try to unite people across class against, the oppressor or another nation. And initially, this bourgeois nationalism has a progressive aspect to it. But then you can see there's a contradiction between nations, and they're addressing that contradiction. But then there's another contradiction between classes, and then as the oppressed classes start to take up this nationalism, start to give it their own flavor, then the bourgeoisie, they start to clash, and there's the bourgeois nationalism. It's like, no, don't listen to those Marx ideas. Don't.
They want to start voting, huh? They want to start voting. We ain't with voting. We say, thumb down to the lions. No, I'm joking. But go ahead.
Exactly. So that's almost like it's a dialectical process in and of itself, right? As the people, they come into nationalism, maybe they learn it from the bourgeoisie, and then they internalize it and they apply their own class interest to it, and they transform the nationalism to something else that actually serves them. And that's dialectical materialism. That's applying the scientific method when you take something and you apply it in real life and make it work for you. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about when you get into studying dialectics. It can be a very complex topic, and I've gotten lost in it, trying to study in the past. But on the other hand, it can be a very simple concept at the same time. And it really is just about understanding the world and getting things to work in a way that serves your interest, that works. It's the scientific method, and but it does talk about understanding it as opposing forces, and the way you're talking about earlier, the constant change, and that really has an inherent revolutionary quality to it, because it's the oppressor that always wants to be like, no, we're not. This is the way things are, and the power is set. And so when you talk about things are always changing, and there is a power structure, then it's always a threat to power to talk about constant change.
Yes, and we love threatening power, by the way, here at Free Aslan, and also, when we talk about you know nationalism in different classes and such, um, and like you said, sometimes it can be very difficult to understand dialectics. The Chicano Power book definitely breaks it down very simplistic form, right? Very simplistic form. That's why one of the reasons I love it as well, because it wasn't written from the bourgeoisie's perspective. This is written from a lumpen perspective. This is and it's written very easily for people to digest, to understand it, grasp it, and then utilize it in their struggles. And I love, we do study groups sometimes too online, and just teaching people these basic concepts like dialectics and using our everyday experience here in the hood, or in prisons or what have you. It's amazing to see people understand these concepts that maybe never even graduated high school. That usually, if we look at 50 years ago, it was the university educated people who were able to grasp these concepts of 100 80 years ago, what have you. And today we have people in prisons, especially because of MIM prisons study groups,
and
grappling with this theory.
I should mention that the first lesson of our intro study group for anyone, and prisoners included, is on dialectical materialism, and it is reading some short essays, some written by people who are in prison, talking about applying these concepts, and we've the questions themselves have evolved over time through a dialectical process as we get feedback, and of course all study is a dialectical process where we're
from the masses to the masses.
Exactly, from the masses to the masses.
Love that.
We're all learning from the readings, we're all learning from each other, and those of us who are running the class can keep improving it based on that feedback. And we really do try, like you were just saying, like we're talking about a lot of people, most of them, never gone to college, no advanced study, and trying to take these concepts and applying them to things in their life is kind of where the focus is on these lessons now. And we do that weekly, where we have these back and forth we do it through the mail with prisoners, where we do it and online, in person, and respond to them and send them out. And we have weekly meetings where we discuss these responses. And it's been an ongoing thing that we've done for years.
And the state must be very scared that lumpen prisoners are understanding and beginning to grapple with these revolutionary concepts like dialectics and all of this stuff. They're really afraid. They even banned the Chicano Power book, right?
They did.
And is it still banned in Tejaslan? Or
so officially, I didn't hear this from the TDCJ, Texas Department of Criminal Justice, but according to our contacts, it was taken off the ban list. But recent attempts to get it in have been very mixed. So half people are getting it, half people are not getting it. Another one I want to mention, last time I think we talked about our new project on the Revolutionary 12-Step program, and that pamphlet was just coming out, and that program has since started. That pamphlet, however, has been banned, or at least censored, in Texas as well as Florida already.
Wow.
Hot off the press, banned, being a threat to security, to teach people how to not be addicted to drugs.
And those are really reactionary states as well, right? Texas and Florida, and we don't, and it's, but, it reminds me when they do censor people and they do attack, if I'm attacked or you're attacked, It reminds me what Mao said is that it's actually a good thing when the enemy attacks you, because you draw a line of demarcation between you and the enemy. And it would be very bad if the enemy couldn't tell you apart from itself and therefore not attack you in any way. So I love when the enemy attacks me. I love it because it's like, you know what, I am doing something good. Mama would be proud of me, and Ma would be proud of me too. I love that. So we have to we just have to continue to understand that's actually a good thing. We know, we're not trying to be in bed with the enemy. We're not trying to, fill the plantation house, and get the other slaves in the field to come and support me. I'm moving in the plantation house, but it's strategic. I'm actually going to decolonize you. Just let me get up in there, and I got a plan. In the meantime, I'm going to I'm going to sign some death warrants and have some people executed on death row. And I'm going to sign off on funding the gang task force across the state. And I'm going to sign off on indictment, federal, all these indictments that are coming. And I'm going to, fund the police across the state. But, it's really revolutionary because I got a plan. I just want to make my movie about myself and my book, but I got a plan, I'm trying to get Hollywood's attention. But anyway, we don't believe in that, and we don't support Theotaco sellouts like that. Free Aslan, we're about decolonizing in the streets, grassroots, with the people. And we're not with going to the bourgeois political system in order to beg them to give us some crumbs to, hey, let me in the plantation. I'm a good slave, I'm not like them. I'm gonna play by the rules. We ain't with that. In Free Islam, we say, no, do not vote. Instead, get in the street, organize with your people, and that's our vote. That's how we vote, with each other, to learn, prepare the masses, build public opinion, mobilize the masses, and prepare to seize power. With that being said, what's your last words, brother? We have 10 seconds.
Support Juneteenth Freedom Initiative. Check out prisoncensorship.info to get involved.
That being said, Free Aslan and Ometeotl.